But the skill and the ability to adapt to stress and maintain your physical and emotional well-being in difficult situations, aka strength and resilience, is not developed, not because you are weak, but because the focus on perfection means you avoid the situations that are going to help you build strength. It's like wanting to run a marathon but deciding not to do it because you don't immediately have the strength and stamina to run the marathon. You want to be a professional marathon runner before you've done the work to be a professional. Hello and welcome to the Liberated Woman podcast, where my guests and I empower ambitious, mission-driven women like you to break free from toxic productivity and embrace a joyful, satisfying life. I'm your host, Tamu Thomas, author of Women Who Work Too Much, leadership coach and keynote speaker. In each episode, we explore personal and professional growth, featuring insightful conversations with inspiring guests, as well as episodes where I explore topics and answer your questions to support your growth and transformation. If you enjoy the show, please do like, subscribe, comment, rate, review, and share. The more listeners I reach, the more impactful guests I can attract to support your journey. Okay, let's begin. Hello, lovely people. I hope you are wonderfully well. Today, I am recording this podcast because I would like to talk about perfectionism. I am talking about the impact of perfectionism in all of my spaces, whether it's my membership community, group coaching space, or my one-to-one clients. Perfectionism is a persistent theme, and for whatever reason, it seems to be the number one common block amongst the different people I work with. And it seems to be something that is very strong at the moment. So, come on in, let's talk about it. If you're new to me, I have an extensive background in social work. I was a child protection social worker for nearly 16 years. So I am an expert in relation to human needs and what happens when our needs are unmet. I am a life and leadership coach. I trained in somatic coaching with a somatic school. Shout out to Nathan Blair and the somatic school. I'm a huge advocate for polyvagal theory and did a training course by Deb Dana called, I think it was like the Foundations of Polyvagal Informed Practice. And I've got a book. My first book was published in May. No, it wasn't. It was published in March this year by Hay House, and it explores the ways systems of oppression, namely patriarchy, capitalism, and white supremacy, create environments where women are constantly over-functioning, over-giving, hyper-independent, like all the things, trying to live up to an impossible standard, and the way that we women are conditioned to believe that we need to be perfect to be valuable. I've been working as a coach since 2019. I started my business in 2018. I really didn't want to be a coach to begin with because I didn't understand it, but eventually I succumbed and became a coach in 2019, began my somatic coach training in the beginning of 2020. There's a whole load more, but I'm not here to share my CV. I'm just saying all of this to say that when I am looking at any topic, and today this topic of perfectionism, I am looking at the psychological, emotional, physical, so the somatic, let's call it neurobiological reasons for perfectionism. My work goes deep into the bones, so I'm not looking at purely the symptoms of perfectionism. I am going to attempt to get to the root in this conversation. One of the reasons I feel compelled to share this podcast with you today is because I am obsessed with women, power, leadership, and authority. I am an advocate for gender and racial equality, and when I do my work, I always consider these things, not just from a neurobiological standpoint, but also as an intersectional feminist. What I'm saying is that I'm going to go deep, okay? And I do that because a lot of the reason why we get stuck in loops, in this case, I'm talking about perfectionism, is because our society conditions us to skim the surface, to not go deep. Because if we understand things deeply, we will make better choices for ourselves and demand more from the societies in which we live, so the government and education and whatever else. And we will liberate ourselves from the janky psychological and social contracts that we are ascribed at birth that we are unaware of. We will start to see the things we have been conditioned to unsee, and we will start to advocate for ourselves. We will actually start to be powerful. Okay? So our society constructs itself in a way where we are not encouraged to go deep. We are not encouraged to sit with and befriend the discomfort so we can really see what's there. We are encouraged to address symptoms but not address the root. And the issue is only resolved when we can get to root level. So, to the perfectionism, I don't know many people who do not like things to a standard of excellence. Okay? It's things like when people say things like, I like nice things. Who doesn't like nice things? It's just that not everybody can access them. Okay? And there are lots of people who have perfectionism tendencies or perfectionist tendencies. There's a difference between having perfectionist tendencies and being a chronic perfectionist. When your need for things to be perfect prevents you from living a life you want to live and doing the work you want to do. It prevents you from being, doing, and having the things you want to have. This is a different matter to having perfectionist tendencies. So, in this episode, I want us to go deeper than surface level. I want us to move on from thinking I'm a perfectionist because that's how I am. Because when we keep doing something that harms us, that is actually an addiction. It's not how we naturally are, it is something we use to cope. Gabor Mate describes addiction as a way of trying to solve problems such as emotional pain, stress, or a loss of control. His extensive experience and research shows that addictions are a defense mechanism against suffering that people don't know how to navigate. And I believe the reason we are unable to navigate this suffering is because we have not been taught the skill of managing discomfort. Our society teaches us to stuff it down, to lock it away. We call that being brave, right? We call people like that strong. And I believe the reason we are unable to navigate this suffering is because we have not been taught the skill of managing discomfort. Our society teaches us to stuff it down, to lock it away, because discomfort is inconvenient. Okay? Discomfort slows down productivity. Discomfort means people have to take responsibility, they can't just blame. Instead, we're told to look on the bright side, to think positive. And we are taught inadvertently, and actually sometimes vertently, I know that's a made up word, but sometimes we are taught that addressing discomfort makes us a downer. I see lots of things. In fact, somebody showed me a t-shirt that said feminist killjoy. The reason feminists are considered to be killjoys is because they won't let things slide. They actually want to look at the things that are causing issues and address them. So all of this comes together to create loads and loads of people who do not have the skill of being able to hold discomfort. We're taught to turn away from it, to ignore it. But you know, cliches are cliches for a reason. And there is a cliche that goes, what you can't heal, no, it goes, you can't heal what you're unwilling to feel. Or something of that nature. You know the one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Understanding the roots of perfectionism can help us move from feeling stuck and anxious towards a place of growth, momentum, and freedom. So, let's start by looking at what perfection really is and how it affects us, not just psychologically, but also physically, right? As a transformational coach and an advocate for us befriending and repairing the relationship with ourselves, I am always going to include somatics as we live and experience the world through our bodies. We live in our bodies first. Our bodies are a sophisticated sensory system, and we experience life through our bodies. Our bodies send messages to our brain, and then our brain computes it. And of course, it's a feedback loop that goes round and round and round, but our bodies are instrumental to our perception. Okay, so many people think of perfectionism as a simple personality trait, a tendency to want to get things just right. But perfectionism goes beyond that, right? Its essence is about protection. It's actually a coping mechanism many of us develop to avoid feeling vulnerable, rejected, or judged. It's a state of survival. And we as human beings are so adaptable that this state of survival can become our normal. What we call intelligence is actually our brain's ability to recognize patterns and use that to predict what comes next. So, our brains are very skilled at looking at the past and using that to predict what's coming next. Our brains are wired to continuously learn from past experiences, and this helps us to create frameworks and associations that help us to anticipate what's going to happen in the future. Our ability to predict what's next also helps us to navigate through uncertainty. It helps us make quick decisions, and it helps us adapt to new situations. For people with perfectionist tendencies, the need for predictability can become a trap. Okay, it creates an environment where you become so risk averse, you need so much certainty that actually what you're looking for is a guarantee. And if you need to know exactly how things will pan out, and if you feel like you'll get it just right, if you can dot all your I's, cross all your T's, leave nothing to chance, any uncertainty can feel terrifying and paralyzing. The need for perfection creates a lot of rigidity and hesitation. We call it procrastination, because your brain perceives any unknowns as potential threats to getting things perfect. And remember, perfection is a survival strategy. So on a somatic level, not being able to be perfect can feel like a threat to your safety. And let's be perfectly clear. When we talk about a threat to our safety, what we are talking about is our bodies perceiving a threat of serious harm or death. And I know it might sound extreme, but that is what is going on below the level of our conscious minds. So the fear about your presentation not being perfect, or not being able to create the perfect social media content to launch your product, or needing to create the perfect birthday party for your children. When that is threatened, our bodies perceive that as potential harm or fatality. So ordinary things in life that we can dismiss with our minds, our bodies, our nervous systems are perceiving that as a threat to our safety. And I talk about things like this in my book, Women Who Work Too Much, which is available wherever you get books. So when you're operating in this way and everything seems like it's got a potential risk of harm or fatality, instead of being flexible and being able to put things into context and trust that good enough is good enough, and for the people I work with, good enough is usually bloody excellent, the perfectionist brain will freeze, waiting for the perfect assurance that will never ever come, because being perfect is a myth. It's not real. There is no such thing as perfection. So this persistent nervous system state of going into freeze to protect you becomes a trait. In 1995, there was some research into childhood trauma, and it discussed how acute adaptive states became maladaptive traits if they persist. And they referred to this as states becoming traits. So when we repeatedly experience states like anxiety or being hypervigilant in response to life's demands, these states can begin to hardwire themselves into our bodies and minds, becoming our habitual ways of being, aka traits. So I don't know if you've heard it, but there's a saying that says states become traits. It comes from this report. So essentially, The way we repeatedly respond to our experiences can start to define our personality over time. And this can lead people to believe that their perfectionism is just who they are. Actually, it's not. It's a maladaptive coping strategy. And the good news is that because perfectionism is a protection mechanism, we can begin to shift it by learning to bring our nervous systems back into a state of flexibility. And I said the word flexibility instead of regulation because I want us to understand that a regulated nervous system is a flexible nervous system. We have a tendency to think that nervous system regulation is about being calm. It's not about being calm, it's about being flexible and adaptable. It's about not being rigid. When you create safety within yourself, you no longer need that perfectionism as armor. You start to recognize it for what it is, a temporary coping strategy that has gone on far too long and has started to define you because it's well practiced. And when you have this knowledge, that's when real freedom can begin. For many of us, perfectionism starts in childhood. We learn it as a way to stay safe. We might have learned that being good or perfect kept us from criticism, or it brought us acceptance or love. But as adults, this habit of striving for being flawless and for pleasing can limit our growth because it keeps us small, and this causes us more harm than good. It's like walking around life in a pair of too tight skinny jeans. No, let us breathe. We don't want marks around our midriffs, around our psychological and emotional midriffs. We want to be able to breathe. We want to be able to bend over without the jeans busting open. So rather than creating the security we're craving, perfectionism often fuels anxiety, pressure, and dissatisfaction because the goal of perfection is impossible to achieve. Because I'm saying it again, we're aiming for something by its very nature doesn't exist. And there's a lot of research on this and how it impacts women. So, for example, there was a study by Hewlett Packard, and that study found that men are much more likely to apply for a job if they meet like up to 60% of the qualifications. I think it might even be lower than that, but I will take their research at face value. While women tend to only apply if they meet 100% of the criteria. So men can look at a job description and think, okay, I can do 60% of that. I'm going to give it a shot. Whereas women, we want to be perfect. We want to be able to show that we're perfectly qualified and experienced and whatever else for this job before we will apply for it. Which means we don't take opportunities to step forward in ways that can be transformative because we're waiting for the right moment, which doesn't exist. And it means we're really harsh and critical to ourselves when what we need is kindness, support, and compassion. So people like Dr. Kristin Neff, who is probably the go-to expert in terms of compassion, self-compassion, reminds us that perfectionism can trap us in a cycle of shame where any mistake feels like a failure and a declaration of us being bad and therefore unlovable, unworthy. Her research suggests that practicing self-compassion helps us see ourselves as inherently worthy, regardless of our achievements or missteps. And it's this shift from shaming ourselves to self-compassion that allows us to exchange perfection for progress, which is what actually leads us to growth. Perfectionism is armor. It may have provided protection at one point in time, but as adults, especially adults who are intentionally choosing to grow and evolve, this armor becomes a prison, keeping you locked in, locked away from realizing your potential. And this is incredibly painful because you can clearly see your potential beyond the prison gates, but your need to do things perfectly keeps you trapped. And this can lead to judging other people and stuff that we call comparison, but actually it's really envy of others because we look at them and think, why you and not me? And maybe we judge them for not doing things quote unquote properly or showing off, being too big for their boots. And it's literally because they are owning qualities we are refusing to own within ourselves. And it feels so uncomfortable, we project it onto them and make them the bad guy because it's really hard to admit that your desire to do things in a way where you can avoid judgment, avoid criticism, avoid mistakes means that you don't take the action you need to take. And the people who are attracted to my work have found all sorts of clever ways to distract themselves from this. For example, they'll read all the books, sign up for the courses, listen to the podcasts, even sign up for coaching programs, but they treat things like educational, theoretical, conceptual. So they have high knowledge. They have high knowledge. They can cite, quote, all the stuff, but the action is low in comparison to the knowledge, which I was going to say is incredibly frustrating, but actually it's really painful. It's really painful because you've got the knowledge. On paper, you understand. If you were to take an exam, you could boss it. But the skill and the ability to adapt to stress and maintain your physical and emotional well-being in difficult situations, aka strength and resilience, is not developed. Not because you are weak, but because the focus on perfection means you avoid the situations that are going to help you build strength. It's like wanting to run a marathon, but deciding not to do it because you don't immediately have the strength and stamina to run the marathon. You want to be a professional marathon runner before you've done the work to be a professional. There was something going around a little while ago about Usain Bolt, and it said that we have only seen Usain Bolt run for about 10 minutes in total because he is so fast that all the races he has done that have been televised tot up to less than 10 minutes. Perfectionism didn't get him to that perfect score, time, whatever we want to call it. What we perceive to be his perfection, like his goals, it required practice, resilience, and dedication to his goals. Like he started his athletic career when he was 12. It took years and years and years for him to be able to do that. If we don't give ourselves a chance to build the skill, we're never going to have the skill. We're just going to be judging ourselves by impossible standards and not doing the work that's going to enable us to make any progress. So next, I'm going to talk about the neurobiology of perfectionism. But before that, I want to tell you about a planning event I have got coming up, which is taking place on Sunday, the 28th of December, 2024. If you are somebody that relates to having perfectionist tendencies and you want to make 2025 your best year yet, I would like to invite you to my Dream Big, Plan Smart workshop. It is going to be so great for you. It is 2.5 hours on Sunday, the 28th of December, 2024. And during this event, you are going to set intentional goals and create a simple, practical plan for the new year. One that helps you let go of perfect and embrace progress. I'm going to guide you through strategies to focus on what truly matters, so the high value work that moves the needle. And I'm going to support you to see what you need to do to start to let go of overwhelm so that you can feel powerful to take meaningful steps towards creating these dreams without getting stuck in the weeds, without getting stuck in the details. This is an opportunity to have some harmony between ambition and well-being and move forward with clarity and confidence. It is going to be so helpful for you because you are going to break down the steps you need to take to be able to realize your dreams. And it's going to help push away perfectionism because you're going to see what's required. And we're not doing some hocus pocus fancy stuff based on an ideal version of yourself. This is about meeting yourself where you are and creating a plan that nurtures your progress, not lots of criticism, not shaming yourself, not holding yourself to impossible standards. We are going to be creating plans that help you to create the habits necessary to make 2025 feel delicious. If that sounds like a bit of you, if you secure your place by Friday, the 8th of November 2024, you will be able to book it at the ridiculous early bird rate of £22.22. It will be going up on midnight on the 8th of November 2024. So if this sounds like a bit of you, book your place now. Okay, back to the neurobiology of perfectionism. So, perfectionism and anxiety are closely linked, and they have a powerful impact on our bodies. Many of us know the feeling of wanting every detail to be right, trying to control outcomes and avoiding mistakes, and this usually happens without you even thinking about it because it happens below the level of consciousness. It's an automatic protective mechanism that swoops in, trying to protect you before you even have the chance to think about it. It's a bit like when you burn your hand, you don't have to consciously think about pulling your hand away. This is how fast perfectionism and any other protective survival strategy works. This anxiety is not confined to your brain. It affects your whole entire body. According to polyvagal theory, our story follows our state. In other words, our physical state affects how we think and interpret the world around us. When we're anxious, our body shifts into survival mode, releasing stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, and the other one beginning with N that I always forget. I could quickly Google, but I'm not going to. You don't need to know that bit. Well, you do, you can Google if you want. And these hormones are designed to prepare us for action. So it triggers our fight, flight, or freeze response. And usually we go into freeze when we can't fight or flight. So that fight or flight energy gets trapped inside us. And while this cocktail is helpful in situations of real danger, this response keeps us on high alert, quote unquote, protecting us from perceived threats like failure or criticism when perfectionism is at play, and we just hold it inside. It just cycles round and round our bodies, and then it creates an environment where one small thing can trigger off all of the survival stress we've already got inside us and add more on top. So we can respond in ways that are over the top for what we're actually experiencing. And perfectionism tends to cycle through all of the survival states. So we might start in fight mode, ready and determined to make everything perfect. And then things start to feel overwhelming. So we might start to flip into flight, running away, avoiding, procrastinating. And that then leads us to freeze, where we hold it all inside because we don't know where to start. And then this can become so overwhelming that we go into shutdown, collapsed. We feel paralyzed. We feel exhausted. We feel like we haven't done anything all day, but we are knackered because this cycle is draining. And this is why perfectionists are often prone to burnout. Our bodies were not designed to sustain this constant survival response. We're supposed to survive, process, move on. But we don't do the processing. We just try to straight away go on to moving on, which means we're just stuffing it all down. So our bodies are having to work really hard to repress and keep all of this stuff shut down. And it's bloody exhausting, which is why people who operate in these states often feel depleted. The somatic, aka physical impact of perfectionism is huge. Anxiety, which is our body's way of telling us there's something to be terrified about, especially when it's chronic, floods our bodies with stress hormones, keeping us in a hyper alert state. And the combination of those hormones and that state becomes very, very addictive. Over time, it rinses you out, keeping you feeling constantly drained. So again, I want to remind you, it's not just in your head, it ravages your whole body, because it's your whole body system that is carrying the weight of all of this frenetic, anxious energy. I mentioned shame earlier. Perfectionism is often rooted in shame, which tells us we are not enough. Not that what we're doing is not enough, but we as people are not enough. And that we need to do more, be more to actually be worthy. So, neurobiologically, shame triggers that same survival response. So, we're just triggering survival, survival, survival. It's terrifying and depleting. And similar to what I talked about earlier on, about our brains perceiving things as a threat to our safety, shame is a massive threat to our safety, because it means that we are risking our ability to belong. It means that we are risking our ability to connect, to be accepted. And that again creates more cycles of fight, flight, freeze. So, understanding the connection between perfectionism, anxiety, and shame and our biology is powerful. It provides you with the knowledge that perfectionism isn't just about wanting to do well, it's a pattern that's deeply rooted in our survival responses. Perfectionism is about trying to protect you. And when we recognize this, we can start to approach it with compassion and care, understanding that it's our biology's way of trying to protect us rather than it being a personal failing or a flaw. And just this understanding opens the door to change. So, with this information, you have now got a clearer picture of what's happening internally. Okay, so I want to talk about what it looks like to shift from perfectionism to progress, because this shift is so powerful. Growth doesn't need perfection, it needs momentum. I'm going to say that again. Growth doesn't need perfection, it needs momentum. So I'd like to share a story about a client I worked with recently. She came to me because she wanted to take her business to the next level, and she knew that perfectionism was holding her back, and she was ready to address it. She was over it. So when she first came to me, I joked that one of my ideal client archetypes is somebody who acts like Sandy from Greece. You know Greece. Tell me more, tell me more. That one. So one of my ideal client archetypes acts like Sandy at the beginning of the movie Grease, when she damn well knows she's Sandy at the end of Grease. When I shared it with this person, she laughed, and the image really resonated with her. She recognized herself as behaving like Sandy when she was no longer Sandy anymore. And over time, she began to see herself as whole. She started embracing her strengths and also her imperfections, and she wasn't shaming herself for these so-called imperfections. She realized that perfection was an illusion, and that realization helped her to reflect on the fact that she'd already achieved so much in her life without being perfect. Her transformation across our program was powerful to watch. Her body language changed, her style evolved. Like, she used to come on looking really professional. And all of a sudden, it's not that she didn't look professional anymore, she still did, but she was a bit edgier. She started wearing chunky jewelry, styling her hair differently, and she just carried herself with a lot more confidence. Her voice grew stronger. She even started taking action without overthinking every detail. Like, she was somebody who would organize things and plan things to the nth degree. And she realized that that was becoming a hiding place. So she started to become risk aware rather than risk averse. She started seeing her mistakes or missteps as learning opportunities and celebrating her growth along the way. Sometimes I did literally have to hold her still so that she would celebrate her growth. But it all started to have an impact. And it was a huge shift from how she used to come to our sessions, wanting to make notes about every single thing, creating all of these wonderful spreadsheets, which are very admirable. But it meant that she got so lost in the planning, she wasn't take it was all plans, no action, basically. And she realized through our work together that this was more about control than effective planning. And by the end of our work, she was making more money. She was putting boundaries in place in terms of her relationships. She was able to stop being the counselor for all of her friends and recognize that her friends could have their own process and they could sort things out, and she could just be an empathetic witness. And she came on in leaps and bounds. When I tell you, like, even her complexion changed. And at the end of the program, she said that she realized that actually she wasn't Sandy before, or she wasn't playing like Sandy before when she was actually Sandy after. She was playing Sandy when she was actually Rizzo. Mic drop. I think I probably screamed when she said that. Bold, whole, unapologetically herself. Phenomenal. Phenomenal. And, you know, in her words, she said that working with me was transformative. She said that I supported her to gain clarity in her business, which helped her to develop the confidence to do the scary things. She started taking bigger steps in her business now, and she's had her most successful year in terms of sales. But more importantly for her, she feels happier and healthier. She's enjoying the journey on a whole new level. She's got a laser focus on where she wants to go and the energy, motivation, and confidence to do so. This is what I talk about when I say that I work with people on system change. You cannot change little bits here and there if you want to really change. You need to be prepared to change. I know that was a bit clunky, but you know what I'm saying. When I work with people, I work with them at the level of transformation. If you just want to tweak this little thing over there, but you don't actually want to look at what needs to be changed in here, inside yourself, my work's not going to work for you. If you want everything external to change, but you don't realize that the internal shift needs to occur before the external shift will occur, then you're not going to make the changes you want to make. You want to be addressing symptoms, not the cause. So this is a real demonstration of the shift from perfectionism to progress. She has not had her best year in business yet because she was sitting down planning, strategizing, and making sure everything was being done perfectly. She was able to do that because I worked with her to develop a plan that met her where she was, and she took action. She wasn't waiting for the right time. Let me tell you something. That's the right time. That's the right time. I'm not very good at clicking, clearly. This is another right time. You can make the right time when you decide for it to be the right time. So now I want to share some practical tools that are going to help you get out of this cycle of perfectionism so that you can start building momentum. Momentum is so much more sexy than bloody perfectionism. So, number one, the 1% rule. I want you to start by focusing on making 1% improvement each day. And no, I'm not reinventing the wheel with any of these tools that I'm sharing, because quite frankly, it's not that there's a lack of information. There's a lack of implementation and integration. So I want you to listen to these, make a note, and see how you can implement, see how you can integrate. Okay, so let's get back to the 1%. Focus on 1% improvement every day. Each small step compounds over time. We live in the micro. A micro movement every day is much better than random periodical movements here and there. So I'm thinking about James Clear, Atomic Habits, and his concept of tiny actions repeated consistently, making powerful change. And consistent doesn't necessarily mean doing the same thing every day in every way. That's not my consistent. I'm a person with ADHD. The moment you put that in front of me, I'm just not going to do it. But me having a regular practice and having rituals and routines that support 1% progress every day, support making powerful change. We don't have to wait to do grand gestures. Our society of intensity addiction and urgency culture makes us feel like unless it's big and bold, it doesn't make any difference. Actually, the things we do day after day make a huge amount of difference. That's number one. So number two, self-compassion. So My invitation to you for this one, like before, self-compassion felt so vulnerable, it made me feel weak. It gave me the ick. I hated it. I really hated it. But something that helped me enter into this wonderful world of self-compassion was laying my hand on my heart. It just helped me to soften. So my invitation is, you can do it with me now. Place your hand on your heart, take a deep breath, and just offer yourself some kindness. That kindness could literally be on your next exhalation, inviting your body to soften. It could literally be thinking about something you appreciate about yourself. And then taking a moment to remember that you are enough as you are. And that it's safe for you to trust the journey. This gentle practice helps you access self-compassion, which can very tenderly, very gently open you up to growth without the pressure and the constant chastisement. If that feels too far, if it's like, no, I can't do that, it could literally be your hand on your heart and asking yourself, what do I need in this moment? What will provide me with support in this moment? Taking actions like that on a regular basis make a whole load of difference. A whole load of difference. Another thing I highly recommend, so tool 3, is a future self check-in. So instead of like being focused on potential mistakes, try connecting with your future self. So have an image of the future you who has moved beyond perfectionism, is living the life you want to live, doing the work you want to do, being around the people you want to be around. Somebody who embodies their power and doesn't think they need to be perfect to be accepted. Connect with that version of yourself and ask that version of yourself for guidance. Ask that version of yourself to support you with where you're at. So I was doing something recently and I needed help, but perfectionism and hyper-independence was like, no, you should be able to do that, like really wagging my finger at myself. I put my hand on my heart and I zoomed into the future and connected with myself at 50. And, you know, at 50, I'm a baddie living by the sea, writing books, doing keynotes where I'm getting paid like 100 grand for a keynote on global stages and this and that. And I connected with that version of myself. And I asked myself, what should I do in this moment? And I just looked at how I was operating at that golden 50 age. And I was operating in a way where I knew I couldn't do things on my own. I needed support to get to where I got to. I had no expectation of me being able to do everything all the time. Therefore, I had to ask for help. It made total sense that I would ask for help rather than sit down and suffer. And what became abundantly clear to me when I connected with that future version of myself was that perfectionism would kick that future version of myself further down the line. And I don't want that future version of myself further down the line. Quite frankly, I want to collapse that timeline. So connecting with my future self and getting guidance from that version of me, I find very, very helpful, and I invite you to do the same. And then my last tool for today is movement. Okay, so when we are perfectionists, we can often be trapping so many feelings, emotions, sensations inside ourselves. And, you know, we're trapping them inside our bodies. We need to move to release it. So I highly recommend voracious movement, vigorous movement, if necessary, aggressive movement. I am known to skank out to Dizzy Rascal's Stop That or some other grime tune because it allows me to embody that aggressive energy I need to get things moving. It doesn't matter if it's skanking to grime, strength training. I love strength training. Dancing, brisk walking, Pilates, whatever it is, just engaging in a physical activity that gets your heart rate up, that makes you sweat a bit, increases your breathing. This can be incredibly beneficial. Movement allows you to discharge stress and it helps to bring your body out of that stuck, anxious state. Actually, do you know what? A bonus one. When you're about to do a piece of work and it tends to be or you're about to do anything, doesn't matter what it is, and it tends to be the type of thing you get your knickers in a twist about and the perfectionism starts to creep in, I suggest moving before you do that piece of work. So I bought a walking pad. I will listen to some pumping tunes on my walking pad. At the moment, I am obsessed with Glorilla's album, Glorious. And actually, I've got a new one now, Tyler, the Creator's album, Chromacopia. Exquisite. So listen to that super loud whilst I'm walking on my walking pad, or I'll dance, I'll work out before I do what I'm doing, or go for a walk. Those things can really, really help us. And there was some research done actually where they were measuring people's creativity, and people who just sat down and got on with whatever creative task weren't as creative as the people who went out for a walk first. I think maybe the people who did the work were 25 or 40% more creative than the other people. I can't remember the exact figure, but the study showed that moving your body, ideally outdoors, helps you to be more creative. And now I'm going to share some self-coaching prompts. So I advise you to pause, get a pen and paper if you haven't got that already, so that you can write down these prompts and then you can journal on them. So number one, in what areas of my life has perfectionism helped me to grow or succeed? And how can I use these strengths without needing to be perfect to create even more positive impact? Second prompt, if I knew that taking imperfect action would bring me closer to my dreams, what would I do differently this week? And the third one, how would my life look and feel if I trusted that I am worthy even when things don't go as planned? And what small steps can I take today to start to live from this place of radical self-acceptance and confidence? And I'm going to close this episode with an affirmation. And it goes, may I know that I am worthy and whole, exactly as I am. May I trust that each step I take is moving me toward the life I desire. May I know that mistakes and missteps serve as powerful lessons that enable me to build the strength and resilience necessary for the journey ahead of me. Okay, folks, that's it from me. I hope this episode has been useful. If it has, and you think it will resonate with people in your community, please do share. I would also love it if you could share on social media. And if you are on Instagram, tag me at tamu.thomas. Also, I'm the same there on Threads. And those are the platforms I use, really. I have actually started dipping my toe into TikTok. But anyway, if you share, please do tag me so that I can reshare. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you next time. Well, speaking to you via the airways next time. Actually, one more thing. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. If there are topics you would like me to talk about, please do complete the form and let me know. And if you have a question you would like me to answer, I will also make sure there's a space in the form so that you can ask me your questions and I can answer them for you. Okay then, my loves, take good care. Until next time, bye. Thank you for joining me on the Liberated Woman podcast. Your time and attention is valued. I hope you found today's conversation insightful, inspiring, and even galvanizing. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, and share. Like many things in our digital experience, the algorithm rules, so your interaction is vital. Your support helps me reach more listeners and attract impactful guests. Tune in for more empowering discussions and practical tips to help you live life on your own terms. Until next time, I'm Tamu Thomas, reminding you to embrace your joy. Podcast produced by me, Tamu Thomas, edited by Biongolia, podcast music by James Anderson.